Democratic Congresswoman and U.S. Senate candidate Jasmine Crockett of Dallas. Thank you so much and welcome back to Ion Politics.
Absolutely. It's great to see you.
In the heart of Texas, a new voice is shaking up the political landscape. She's bold, unapologetic, and not afraid to call out injustice where she sees it. Today, we're diving into the rise of Congressman Jasmine Crockett, a rising star in the Democratic Party who's making waves with her recent stand against ICE's expansion. But why is her party staying quiet? Let's break it down in this biographical deep dive. Born on March 29th, 1981, in St. Louis, Missouri, Jasmine Felicia Crockett grew up in a world that taught her resilience from the very start. Raised by a single mother who worked multiple jobs, Crockett learned earlier on about the struggles of working class families. She often shares stories of her childhood, where financial hardship were a constant, but so was the drive to succeed. Crockett attended Mary Institute and St. Louis Country Day School on a scholarship, proving her intellect and determination. After high school, she headed to Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee, earning a degree in business administration. But her passion for justice led her to law school at the University of Houston, where she graduated in 2006. As a young attorney, Crockett specialized in civil rights and criminal defense fighting for the underrepresented. She once said in an interview, "I became a lawyer because I saw how the system chews up people who look like me." The foundation and advocacy would propel her into the political arena.
Democratic Congresswoman and U.S. Senate candidate Jasmine Crockett of Dallas. Thank you so much and welcome back to Ion Politics.
Absolutely. It's great to see you.
Good to see you. So you recently wrapped up a 2-day, 17 stop in South Texas. And I'm wondering, what was your message to Democratic voters there?
So, the main message that I was delivering is that we've got to be unified. We can't afford to sit this election out. Affordability is really a real issue for most of us, as well as we obviously had to have conversations about immigration and whether or not what we're seeing right now is what we should demand. Or what we should actually allow to be taking place in our communities. But it was definitely more so centered around unity, affordability, and what is taking place with ICE.
Crockett's political journey kicked off in 2019 when she ran for the Texas House of Representatives in District 100. It wasn't easy. She faced a crowded primary, but won with her fiery rhetoric and focus on criminal justice reform. Serving from 2021 to 2023, she quickly made a name for herself by sponsoring bills on voting rights, police accountability, and affordable housing.
Your campaign blasted a new poll that was released last week by Emerson College Polling and Nexstar Media and called it an outlier, which showed James Tallarico ahead of you by 9 percentage points. Your campaign put out your internal poll showing you 13 points ahead. So who's the real front runner here?
Listen, the only poll that matters is going to be on election day. If I'm going to be perfectly honest, I've never been the biggest fan, but I will tell you that as someone who has studied statistics, because I was a business major in undergrad, that Emerson poll was deeply flawed. And so, in short, 28% of the people that participated in that poll were self-identified Democrats. And so ultimately, the only number that actually really mattered was the fact that even though only 28% of that electorate, which we don't anticipate that 28% of the Texas electorate will be Democrats, we anticipate we'll have a little bit more than that. Even under those circumstances, I was leading against Ken Paxton. Same as our internals have revealed that I actually am leading a Republican in this race. The other issue that we saw was that of the persons that they said would vote in the Democratic primary, they put 25% of the Democratic primary as independents. And we know that independents actually skew more so towards a demographic that my opponent attracts, which is white men. And so we don't anticipate that we're going to have a Democratic primary that's going to be 25% independents and 75% Democrats. We anticipate the numbers will be a lot larger on the Democratic side.
Her style, direct and no nonsense colleagues recall her as someone who doesn't mince words. In 2022, opportunity knocked when Eddie Bernice Johnson retired from Congress after decades in office. Crockett jumped into the race for Texas's 30th congressional district, a Democratic stronghold in Dallas. She won the primary runoff against Jane Hope Hamilton and then cruised to victory in the general election.
And so because of that, that's why you believe that you are the front runner?
I do believe that according to all polls, except for that one, that I am in the lead. But as you just said, we did 17 stops in 2 days, where we went through, I think, a total of 6 cities. The following weekend, this most recent weekend, we did another, I think, 14 stops in 8 cities. So it doesn't matter what any poll says, we are going to work because that's what Texans deserve is to know that they're going to have a candidate that will show up for them in DC, which I've been doing, but will also show up and actually try to earn their vote by going and meeting them where they are.
Entering Congress in 2023, Crockett hit the ground running, joining the House Oversight and Judiciary Committees.
Candidate in the Democratic primary to reassemble the Democratic base and to expand the electorate in November. And that I'm wondering what makes that so?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. When we look at the state of Texas is a majority minority state. And so 61% of the state is people of color. But when we look at who is actually turning out to vote, it is Black and brown folk that are not showing up to the polls. When we look at the demographics that overwhelmingly, well, definitely African Americans overwhelmingly support me. I'm still in the lead with Latinos, and we know that my opponent has been spending a lot of money specifically to try to get Latinos to come over to his side. But considering the fact that we're already there, and so we already have a rapport, and then basically once we start spending our money, we will only continue to hopefully build upon that rapport and that group of people. But if I had to just say this like in very plain language terms, I am the person that can show up and go into the DJ booth and talk to people there. But I am also a PK that can show up at church. I am also someone who can show up in rural Texas because when I graduated law school, that's where I lived, was in rural East Texas before I moved to Dallas. I also served on the agriculture committee. And so whether you're talking about rural Texas and the struggles of, say, those down in Amarillo, as we know that that Tyson plant is going to release 1,700 people because of cattle production. Yeah, I am that person that can engage in those conversations from experience and not just a campaign theoretical standpoint, as well as engage with students on campus or go into a DJ booth or go into a church.
Crockett didn't stay a backbencher for long. She became a household name through viral committee hearings. Remember her takedown of Republicans during the Hunter Biden investigations? Or her passionate defense of voting rights?
So your campaign said about 2 million registered voters who are people of color did not vote in the 2024 general election, among them 700,000 African Americans. What are you going to do to attract them to come out and vote in the primary and in the general election?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that we're doing. My campaign is all about meeting people where they are. So here recently, there was a big concert in Grand Prairie. And I knew the artist that was performing in that concert. That artist invited me on stage. These are not things that you typically see in a campaign whatsoever. That's what we've got to do. We've got to communicate and meet people where they are. We also are making sure that we are going out to, um, uh, the schools. So right now, as we're getting ready for the debate, we have HBCUs that are going to be doing debate watch parties. So I'm making sure that I'm hopefully connecting really well with both young, middle-aged, as well as older, but definitely the things that African Americans do, or even Latinos. You may find us at one of the flea markets because we've been doing that as well. I think for far too long, it's a matter of kind of like only the politicos talking to politicos. We don't want that to be the name of the game for our campaign. We want people to know that I'm accessible and that I'm real. And so that's why we are showing up exactly where the people are.
Clips of her sharp exchanges racked up millions of views on social media. One standout in a 2023 hearing, she famously called out hypocrisy in GOP attacks, saying, "I'm just a straight shooting Texan." Her charisma and quick wit drew comparisons to progressive icons like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
How important is the electability issue for the general election in this primary? And I ask you that because I asked Representative Tallarico that last week, and this is what he told me. I think it's the central question in this primary: who can win in November? Every Democratic primary voter who shows up in this primary needs to have one question on their mind, and that is who is best to positioned to win in November? Because if we don't win, we can't help people. So, what do you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to win. And I'm the only person in this race that is ever polled ahead of any Republican. So I guess I won't necessarily disagree. I think that unfortunately, what we have seen is there's been this kind of undertone about what electability looks like. And the reality is that the numbers don't bear out. The numbers bear out that there's only one person. And I've only been in this race for a little bit more than a month. Even in that flawed Emerson poll, and again, as I laid out how that poll was flawed, at the end of the day, that poll was skewed against me, yet I was actually still beating Ken Paxton in that poll. The best that my opponent, who's been in this race for some months now, the best that he was doing was tying with Ken Paxton. And that is still not considering all the people that typically don't vote. One of the things that we've got to do is we've got to figure out who can excite the base. And I think that that is what matters most when we're talking about electability, because what we saw in this most recent presidential is that the base stayed home. They didn't necessarily go out and vote for Republicans. They just didn't go out and vote at all. And so having someone that people know, that they trust, is an actual fighter, not just in words, but in actions in this moment. Because right now people are scared, whether they're a Democrat, Republican, or independent. They want somebody that they know will not fold on the federal level. That's why we have a record number of both Republicans and Democrats that are now deciding to retire. We've got people that have been in politics for a very long time, but are really struggling to find their footing in this type of environment, which I am uniquely qualified to deal with.
By 2025, Crockett was a rising star, fundraising millions and building a national following. She endorsed progressive causes, from Medicare for all to climate action, while maintaining ties to her Texas roots. But her real breakout came when her decision to run for U.S. Senate in 2026 against fellow Democrat James Tallarico in the primary. Polls shows her leading with strong support from progressive and communities of color. This move positioned her as a challenger to the status quo, aiming to flip a long red seat blue in a state that hasn't elected a Democrat senator since 1994.
You brought up the debate, which you are going to be having with Tallarico on Saturday. My question to you is, why should Democratic primary voters select you over him?
Yeah, so I think number one, if we talk about experience, there's only one person in this race that has both state and federal experience, and that's me. But more importantly, it's a federal position. And so I think federal experience should be paramount. Again, so many people in our base are so upset and they keep asking questions like, well, what are y'all doing? What are you going to do? I think it is important to have somebody that you know exactly who they will be on the federal level, because there's been a lot of people that have thought that someone was going to be a certain thing on the federal level and they've been disappointed. Mind you, Mr. Fetterman is one of those types of people. People have been very disappointed with him. And I'm not saying that that would necessarily be the case with James Tallarico. What I'm saying is that people don't know. You know exactly what you're going to get with me. The final point that I'll say is that it is really important, in my opinion, to think about who is going to be able to go up against whoever is going to make it out of the Republican primary. And we have two people that are trained attorneys that are leading the polls right now. And frankly, these persons, at least the current senator, has engaged in so much back and forth when it comes down to, say, confirming some of the judiciary and that kind of stuff. And we know that Ken Paxton also, as the Attorney General, has engaged in a lot of these legal maneuvers. I think that we need somebody that is going to be very solid on the Constitution and what is unconstitutional and be able to confront them not only in words, but be able to have the credentials to back them up, because that is going to be part of the fight when we get to the general election, is to talk about how unconstitutional and lawless this administration has been. And well, it's easy to kind of say what somebody tells you to say, but it's a little different when you've actually been engaged in that work. And finally, it is the US Senate is the only body that actually has oversight over this Supreme Court. And I think having a trained attorney in that space would benefit Texas the most.
The boldest move, taking on ICE. Fast forward to early February 2026. As President Trump's second term ramps up aggressive immigration policies, ICE announces plans to convert an industrial warehouse in Hutchins, Texas, part of Crockett's district, into one of the largest detention facilities in the nation. Crockett didn't hesitate. On February 4th, she issued a scathing statement. I am aware of reports that ICE plans to convert an industrial warehouse in Hutchins into one of the largest detention facilities in the nation. The next day, she sent letters to DHS Secretary Kristi Noem and acting ICE Director Todd Lyons, demanding they halt the project. But she went further. In a recent YouTube interview, Crockett compared ICE operations to slave patrols, historical groups that hunted enslaved people escaping bondage. She argued that tough immigration stands among some Latinos stem from a slave mentality, where survivors pull up the ladder behind them. This wasn't just rhetoric. It was a direct challenge to the bipartisan consensus on border security, especially in a border state like Texas.
I want to ask you about a controversial statement that you've been asked about on the campaign trail. These are remarks you made to Vanity Fair in 2024, describing the way that some Latinos spoke about a tough illegal immigration policy. You called it the slave mentality, and you said, quote, "It's basically like I fought to get here, but I left y'all where I left y'all, and I don't want no more y'all to come here." So what was your thought back then, and what is your message now when you are asked about this? And some people may have taken offense to this.
Yeah, so I've talked to a number of people, and I've talked to a lot of Latinos, that have basically been like, we completely understood what you were trying to say in that moment. What I want people to understand is that the struggles of the African American community as well as the Latino community are greatly tied. It's the same thing, like for me, understanding our history when I talk about the fact that what I see from ICE right now looks like slave patrols. As an African American woman, what I am doing is I'm framing things in the frame of thought that I can associate them with. And honestly, I think that there's more that unites Latinos and African Americans than divides us. And they continue to try to divide us, even trying to take that particular statement out of context, when the reality was, these are real conversations. No one is saying, oh, the Congresswoman did not have these conversations. There has been a real fear for a lot of people as it relates to immigration. And I was engaging in very real conversations and talking to people that were against more immigration as it relates to this country. So I think that what people should take away from that is that I'm always willing and ready to engage in real conversations so that I can better understand what is going on and how someone feels in a moment, even if they're not of my same persuasion. I want to understand. So that's number one. And I think we should all want elected officials that want to understand what's going on. Number two, that was never said to offend anybody. What it was said is more so out of a frame of reference as it relates to what I can refer to as something as a Black woman.
Why is this her boldest move? It cuts to the core of America's immigration debate, linking modern enforcement to historical oppression.
I wanted to just ask you about what you said, if I heard you correctly, comparing the ICE patrols to slave patrols. Some people may hear that and say that's way too strong. You don't think so?
I don't. And again, this isn't said to upset any, like, I'm not trying to upset Latinos. This is said because I know my history. When I know that slave patrols were some sort of military-like-ish policing force that was going out and grabbing and disappearing people based upon their skin color. People were having to walk around and show their papers. Yeah, that is what it looks like. That's what it looks like to me. And again, if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. And I think that we are currently in a bad way right now in this country. And I do think that we have other examples that we can look at. We were just in Minneapolis, and to hear the stories of US citizens on the ground and what they're experiencing in the aftermath of Renee Good, what they experienced prior to and what they're experiencing now, I don't know why anyone would take this as if those words are too strong. You had a woman that was executed in broad daylight in the middle of her community in front of her wife. She was shot 3 times in the head, and then the officer called her the B word and walked off and jumped into a car. I'm pretty pissed off. And so, I mean, listen, the one thing I want people to know is that my language has never, ever been politically correct, if we're going to be real about it. Jack, you know me well enough. My language has not been politically correct, but my heart has always been in it for the people. And so when I get emotional and I get frustrated about what's happening, I think that we should be more concerned about what's taking place on the streets in America than we are about maybe whether or not my words are upsetting. Because what's upsetting is that there's 3 children that belong to Renee Good that don't have a mother anymore. What's upsetting is that we have US citizens as well as immigrants alike that are being disappeared. We had a record number of immigrants that died in ICE custody last year. We had a record number of US citizens that were abused and incarcerated by ICE that has no authority whatsoever over them. These are the things that are more upsetting to me. It's their actions than it is my words. But I am here to say, for the record, that if my words offend you, that is not the intent. My intent is to make sure that we understand the gravity of what's taking place currently in our country.
Crockett's tying it to broader issues like mass deportation plans under Trump, warning of humanitarian crisis. She's also demanding accountability for the arrests of journalists like Don Lemon and Georgia Ford, who were covering related stories.
What do you say to Republicans who say that people should not be interfering in law enforcement operations, including ICE? And, the Republicans say that it's the Democrats who are really trying to intensify these situations. What do you say to that?
I say they're just either ill-informed or uh, just not paying attention. But as someone who serves on the immigration subcommittee for judiciary, I can tell you that's just not true. I mean, we have constitutional rights. Now, if you believe in the Second Amendment, I need you to believe in the amendment that came before that, the first, right? And we have people that are exercising their First Amendment rights. They have the right to protest. They have the right to engage in, as of right now, they're making threats against Don Lemon, a journalist. I mean, that is freedom of press, right? So they have the rights to do these things. And so this idea of interference, that's not what it is. And as someone who's practiced law, I can tell you that, yeah, interfering with any police duties is typically unlawful on the state and the federal level. But defining something as interference isn't just what you subjectively believe. Interference isn't I'm blowing my horn. Interference isn't I'm recording you. In fact, there is a constitutional right to record law enforcement. They can do that, right? Interference is literally I am trying to arrest somebody and then I'm standing between them. It is not just because you're hurting my feelings or you're hurting my ears. That's not interference. And that is one of the problems that we have right now is that they want to say that they are interfering with their duties. In fact, when we look at the execution of Renee Good, she literally was told by her wife to drive, and she turned her wheel away from the officer and was trying to drive. I have never in my life seen an officer with a cell phone in one hand trying to record and a gun in the other. Never, ever, ever, ever. It doesn't even make sense.
Here's the intrigue. While Crockett's base cheers her on, the broader Democratic Party has been notably quiet. No major endorsements from establishment figures like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer on this specific issue. Why? Immigration is a political minefield. In Texas, where Democrats need moderates, Latino voters to win statewide fiery and anti-ICE rhetoric risks alienating swing groups. Recent polls shows even some Democrats favor stricter borders.
Let me ask you, what do you think on this topic? What's the fix? How would you fix this?
So, first of all, I do have a Clear ID Act, a bill that I filed a while ago. This was about making sure that the officers were required to unmask. We know that there is an emboldening of these actors when they can do it and no one knows who they are. So that's number one. Number two, I also have another piece of legislation that I've been working on with Rokana. And that particular piece of legislation requires body cam. That particular piece of legislation also requires taking the mask off, as well as an independent commission to oversee and look over any of these situations in which ICE officers are involved in use of force. It has some other provisions in there, but long story short, we need bills. That's great. But more importantly, we need enforcement. And right now, that's actually what we're missing. We know, and I'm working on a bill right now because we know that right after Renee Good was killed, the locals wanted to do a joint investigation about what took place. The federal government decided that it did not want to work with the local government to investigate. We've got to change that. No one is trusting this federal government right now. It is definitely not looking like transparency. And we need to make sure that no matter what, if you're saying that, hey, what I did was right, it was justified, then okay, let the investigations take place. But it looks like it doesn't pass the smell test. When you say, no, 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 we don't want to do that. We're not going to run a dual investigation. In fact, we are going to investigate the widow instead because we believe she's a domestic terrorist. Like, that's where we are.
Stricter borders. Crockett's non-traditional campaign. No broadcast TV ads, no named campaign manager has allies anxious, fearing it could hurt in a tough primary. But this silence speaks volume. It highlights the divide between progressive pushing for racial reform and centrists playing it safe. If Crockett wins the primary on March 3rd, it could force the party to confront those tensions head on, especially with Republicans like Ken Paxton leading on the other side.
I did want to ask one other topic before I let you go, and I appreciate your time. Going back to a campaign issue, as you saw, Attorney General Ken Paxton's campaign put out an ad. It was AI. It was showing you dancing with Senator Cornyn and using your quote that you have a dance partner in Congress, I believe. What was your reaction to that?
That was actually John Cornyn's quote. That was not my quote,
Okay.
but it was in a profile done with the Texas Tribune about me. Listen, I mean, if I just look at the actual substance of what he was trying to say, I think this is why our country is in crisis right now. The reality is that it hurts John Cornyn in his primary, that he has worked with one of his Congress members to get things done on behalf of Texans. That's a problem. Now, this doesn't impact me in my primary whatsoever. No one believes that it's a bad idea that I have worked on fentanyl legislation with Senator Cornyn or food security bills with Senator Cornyn. Like, they don't believe that, or that we got the Grant Transparency Act signed into law by President Joe Biden together. Like, no one thinks that it's a problem from my side, but the other side does not want to govern. And I think that that's really should be the big takeaway. I know that we have a lot of concerns about AI and, how AI will play out in campaigns and whether or not we should be using it. Besides all of that, what he was trying to get to is that we have worked together in a bipartisan way. And I think people should be alarmed that in the Republican Party of today, working across the aisle to fix things for Texans is a slam against you.
All right, we will leave it there. Democratic Congresswoman and U.S. Senate candidate Jasmine Crockett of Dallas. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
The future of Jasmine Crockett. Jasmine Crockett represents a new breed of politician, authentic, outspoken, and ready to fight. Whether she flips Texas blue or sparks a national conversation on justice, her rise is one to watch, as she said in December 2025 video. Republicans are starting to lose ground economically. We're fighting for 2026. Will her bold move pay off? Only time will tell. Subscribe for more political deep dives. What do you think of Crockett's stance? Comment below. Share. And we are very interested in your thoughts. And we're very interested in your thoughts. So put them down in the comments. Let's debate. And thank you.